Welcome to the Pulse of Story. My name is Derek Christopher, and I am so thrilled to have back on the podcast the great Dara Marks. Dara Marks, if you don't know, voted the top script consultant in Hollywood, has written the best-selling book Inside Story, has traveled the world doing conferences and seminars and expos for some of the top people in the world, has consulted on thousands of scripts with some big names, and now is what I think is one of the greatest things that somebody has done in this industry, which is she's actually recorded her program on video for you to watch, and it's on demand and you can buy it, and it's an amazing learning tool. So Dara, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. What a wonderful intro. Thanks a
Yeah,
lot. Yeah, I appreciate it.
yeah, you bet. So
Yeah.
here's my question. I was trying to think, how do I frame when you come on here what we can talk about? And for some reason, Aristotle and poetics popped into my head because, McKee's been teaching structure forever. Sid taught structure. Structure is a big thing. And I kind of feel that you go past what the normal structure is. So what I did was I pulled sort of the six pillars of story structure in screenwriting and TV writing. And I want to go through them one by one and sort of get your thoughts on how it works structurally and then how what you do adds on to it.
Thank you because I think this is an actually fascinating subject that doesn't really get enough attention because as we talk about it, I think the writing in general and storytelling has gotten stuck in some places, and I
Yeah.
think that this is part of it. And I think writers will really appreciate kind of opening it up and feeling, wait a minute, there's a little
Yeah.
more to the story,
Well, here are the six pillars that I pulled from it. One is that plot drives purpose.
right?
Two is actions reveal character. Three is reversals elevate the stakes. Four is recognition deepens the meaning. Five is conflict creates catharsis. And six is that craft elements must serve the story. So those are sort of what Aristotle said makes for a good story. But I think that what you kind of did in your work is you synthesized all of that and you added to it. So whereas Aristotle sort of described what must be in a story, you went on to explain why it happens inside the human being, why there's a transformation in the person.
I'll tell you that I was pulled into it myself because one of the problems with this kind of overview of story isn't that it's not have some basis in exactly what we see in a good story. It's observational,
Yeah.
which is different than as writers it's like motivational what comes from the inside. So we can say plot and we can say character development, we can say all of these things, and if you're doing an analysis or a review, very helpful. You can say,
Yeah.
I couldn't follow the plot. I didn't feel anything at the end. All of that can be true, okay?
Yeah.
But as a writer, or a director, or anyone working in actually the creative side of this, I think the more important question for me, and it's what stirred me in the development of all of this, because I was trained more classically, and then I kept saying, but yeah, but where does it come from? Because
Yeah.
I think this is why the study of structure and so on gets a really bad rap because it's telling you what should be as opposed to working with you as an artist, as a creator, to say, where do we find this within ourselves?
Right.
Because story is natural. And
Yeah.
and when it's described in simply structural terms, it's not that it's artificial. It can feel like rules, like you do this because I say so.
Yeah.
And my view of story is very much the opposite. That narrative is how we process life. Everything we do and everything we say has a narrative component, and well, it's all narrative, okay?
Yeah.
And therefore there is something about it that I feel is very essential in terms of reflecting who we are in this world. And one of the deep, to me, the deep basis of all of this is the sort of the archetypal concept that we are all the same except in the detail. So
Right.
that as a writer is working with the components of story, which need a plot,
Yeah.
need character development, um, we need more instruction on how to go within and to really find that story inside ourselves because there's no place else it's coming from.
Well,
Okay.
I think that that's what I was thinking because Aristotle said sort of that plot drives the purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and I whereas I think that you sort of come from the perspective that plot sort of forces the internal transformation of a character.
Well, again, you're going to hear me constantly say, let's go
Yeah,
back and look at who we are. Okay. That one of the things that I have done with my work is to help writers see that whether we're conscious of it or not, we live in two worlds simultaneously. We live in an external world where things happen, okay, often out of our control.
yeah,
And then simultaneously, we have an inner world where we are processing everything that goes on. And it has to do with our history, our memory, how we physically are, all of those things. So you and I have shared the last 5 minutes together in the physical world, but in the external, in the internal world, we both have different things going on, and that's
yeah.
true of anybody who is watching this. So, story needs to have a reflection of this inner world and outer world context. Okay, so for me, when I define plot, plot is the external conflict. It's what's happening in the outer physical world. And to make a powerful story, we need an internal context of how the protagonist is facing that conflict
Right.
and what it is forcing them to do. So let me add one more piece to that.
Yeah,
So if we look at a strong story, okay, it's not just saying, he went to the store and bought milk. All right,
yeah,
there's something there is something that has a deeper component to the story, and so stories that make it to a novel or make it to a movie have an external conflict that wants to reflect how in our own real lives I always say we don't grow and change just because it's a good idea.
yeah.
We grow and change in relationship to how we face external conflict. And those sort of things are working in harmony in a well-told story. They push each other. Something happens, and we have an internal response to it. And
Well,
that's what
this
forces
is
growth.
yeah, and this is sort of what I was thinking with the second pillar of Aristotle, which is that action reveals character. But I think that it also has to reveal something from the internal, like a fatal flaw of the character.
Right, right. Well, that's true. I mean, I take it once my own sort of the reinterpretation of those words, as I always say to my students, is that if you want to know how character is developed, look at how your own character has been developed.
Yeah,
That the good looks, the status, the intelligence, or whatever you were born with, definitely has an impact on who you are. But
yeah,
it is how you have faced the challenges in your life that has determined the quality of your character.
yeah.
So when we're designing character, it's the challenge you put in front of them that is going to reveal their capacity to to grow, to evolve, to be present, to fulfill their own destiny, to be authentic. All of that is those two things go very tightly together. But a writer needs to know how to distinguish between the two so
Yeah.
that they own the navigation of it. You see what I'm saying?
But so a lot of that comes from the writer. How do you know how much of yourself to put into the character? How do you know where to sort of cut off how deep you want to go with a character?
Well, again, I was teaching a class, and I gave several of the students a pen, or excuse me,
Yeah.
a pencil. And
Yeah.
I said, write me a story about this pencil. Well, guess what? Of all the students in the class, that's how many different stories I had, because the pencil doesn't have a story to tell. Okay.
Yeah.
There's only one place that any story you create comes from, and it's coming from you. All right. So that holds the key to everything that you need to know. Now, in terms of getting to it, it needs processing. Okay,
Yeah.
so we write, we write unconsciously, and we process and write to become more conscious of what the story is trying to say to us and through us.
Well, so I mean, for example, you just made me think about, I was asked to write that essay for the book, and
Mm-hmm.
I talked about the birdcage. And
Yes,
all of a sudden, I started, I don't know why, all of a sudden I started digging really deep into things that happened in my past
sure.
and things with my parents and whatnot, to the point that when my wife read it, she goes, I'm really shocked that you put this in there. And so I guess that's what you're talking about, is that each person's going to come with their own depth, their own knowledge, their own information, and build it into the character. But then how do you, as a consultant, sort of know how to find the equilibrium in the characters, that they all sort of balance out?
You know, uh, uh, that's part of the magic and the beauty of the creative act, that
Yeah.
um, every single piece of anything I've ever read leaves breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
right. Oftentimes you can find something in something someone has written where they will repeat an idea over and over again. It could be something very simple, and it's not intended to be anything other than a joke. But why is
Yeah.
it repeated? They can quote something. Um, uh, there are a lot of different ways, and sometimes it's like the most obvious thing that isn't there.
Yeah.
Okay, that we are writing around what we aren't quite ready to deal with. I have a personal little story on this. I once
Yeah.
wrote a piece, and it was about a group of middle-aged women, and as some of it was working really well, and I was really struggling myself to try and figure
Yeah.
out part of what the story is really about. And I should add that I was around 50 years old at the time that I wrote this. And one of the people who read it looked at me and they said, "Well, all of this is interesting and very funny, but all of these women are in midlife going through menopause. And
Yeah.
it's not even mentioned anywhere in the story." And I
Yeah.
suddenly realized in that moment that that's what actually I was actually writing about, and I had completely avoided the subject. So
Yeah.
and so that was a wonderful clue for me to where to begin to go and look. But writers are become very intimate with their
Yeah.
projects. And it's not like a writer doesn't want to do this, but we write from the outside in. We don't write from the inside out. I don't, even if we have a strong belief in something or a
Yeah.
strong emotional tie to something. One of the ways that I sort of explain this, it's like, to me, the definition of creativity is to create, to make new life. So the whole act of creation is to get to the next new thing, is to get to
Right.
that discovery. So no matter what we write, we are writing up to the boundary of our known world. And what the call to create is to pierce that boundary and see what's on the other side.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I'm doing an analysis or when I'm working with someone, I, I'm I'm very, very gentle in doing this work, because you don't want to push anybody.
Yeah.
That I'm not a therapist, so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm not pushing anybody to go to any to someplace. But it is really um, uh, sort of present in the story, that the
Yeah.
story is trying to say something. And so I often ask this question when we begin the work together. I say to the writer, You've finished writing the script. It's been, someone bought it. It's been made into a movie. The movie is now playing in a movie theater. When people are walking out, what do you want them to be thinking and feeling?
Yeah.
And that's a really important question, because if the answer is I wanted them to really love the car chase, the story's not about very much, right?
Yeah.
Uh, um, so that's why you begin to, there is a process to begin to open this up. And every writer is going to be different. Some writers are going to really dive in and want to work with this. I try and keep it simple because, again,
Yeah.
your story is not therapy. Okay, a
Yeah.
story is a part of you, and its job is not to fix something,
Yeah.
because if we start putting that on story, it goes south. Again, that take that to your therapist. That doesn't, you know. And I, unfortunately or fortunately, I think it has opened some questions that that writers want to go take a look at, because just like my whole issue with menopause is like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, there's something definitely I'm not paying attention to here.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I want to ask you, because in your video workshop, you talk about plot and you talk about character, but the one thing that I thought was incredible too was, one of the lessons is on theme and how
yeah.
theme sort of unifies plot and character. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. To me, theme is the key to the kingdom. Okay,
Yeah.
that one of the things I really encourage writers to do, or to recognize, is that you enter a story any way the story invites you in. You know, you may get a great idea for an action plot, you know, something that is very, very plot driven
Yeah.
and action oriented. You could, you know, the call could be the study of character, or the study of grief, or, you know, something emotional, and that pulls you
Yeah.
in. But there's always going to be then the underdeveloped part of the story.
Yeah.
And this is what theme tends to unify, that if you allow the story, if you allow your early drafts of the story to just flow, it's between you and the universe, whatever you're taking in. And, you know, don't put a judgment on it. Don't force it into a form, you know,
Yeah.
that it has to be something, because to me it's like panning for gold, that you know, you pick up a big pan of it and slush it around, and the gems will rise to the surface. And that's what will happen if you allow it to sort of flow into it. But at a certain point, if you want the story to mature, you've got to move away from this simply intuitive level of developing a story, and move much more deeply into, okay, why am I writing this story?
Right.
And that's where theme comes in. That, you know, you know, it's very important to say that, just like a dream, you can't sort of interpret a dream until you've dreamt it. You can't really get to a theme of your story
Yeah.
until you've written something, because then it wants to rise to the surface and become clear. So once you can do that, then the elements of the action packed story start to make a lot more sense, that someone is driven to something, but what's the inner reasoning for it? And
Yeah.
and what is the, you know, there's something much deeper motivating this. And when you confuse those, fuse can fuse, not confuse,
Yeah.
confuse those things together, then it's, this again mimics real life. And
Yeah.
that's where story takes on its most profound um, relationship with the audience, that all that action, all that saving the world or solving a crime or whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
actually means something. It's pushing towards something, because otherwise it's just a lot of action, it's just a lot of activity, and we don't live in just a lot of activity. I don't care
Right.
how busy we are, all of our activity is impacting our lives. You see what I'm saying? That's
Yeah.
real, that's authentic. A lot of activity for the sake of activity isn't authentic.
So if I'm, one thing that I was reading some reviews on the video that people they either watched it before they started, or people who've written many scripts have watched it because they keep coming back to it. They sort of drink from it because I think
Mhm.
it sparks ideas. I mean, what would your recommendation be that somebody watched the course? Is it before or during, or what's where are they going to get the biggest pop from it?
Well, that was a big question as we were beginning to build the course and put it together because um,
And when you say we, you're talking about with Deb
oh,
Norton too. I want to make it mention.
thank you. I have a
Yeah,
wonderful teaching partner. Her name is
yeah,
Deb Norton, and Deb and I have been teaching together for a long time. I teach, and Deb does experiential work. I was leading seminars for a long time, and I've always gotten a very, very good response to the material because it's
yeah,
so artist oriented. But I always felt as if there was something missing in terms of, well, this is all intellectual. I want to get it out of your head and I want to get it down on the page. And Deb is just extraordinary at then taking the concepts and inviting you to work with them so that the course isn't just about teaching an idea, it's about processing an idea. So that's how the course is designed, and I'm really thrilled with it because the responses we've been getting from students so far has really been over the moon. That
yeah,
it has opened up deep areas for writers that they have never been able to manage well. We, as they say, we write to our strength and we write to our weakness. But if you aren't learning something about how to manage your weakness, you're just going to keep going around in circles. It doesn't matter what kind of notes you get. So if
yeah,
you get a note that says it needs more emotion. You start putting in some crying scenes or yelling
yeah,
scenes or something,
yeah,
as opposed to making it systemic. Okay,
yeah.
and that's what we're doing. So anyway, thank you. And you might have to rephrase this, restate the question.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
no, I
I
I
went
was
on a
just
little
saying that.
tangent here.
Yeah, no. When do you think is the best time for somebody to
Oh,
to
thank
go
you.
through that course?
Right. So we designed the course for writers at every level. Okay. So
Yeah,
if you are a beginning writer or you are at the beginning of a project, then the course will guide you through how to get started, get organized, and so on. Because and we emphasize that. So
yeah,
I may be talking about something, and I will very strongly say I want you to separate this from if you're writing or if you're rewriting,
yeah, yeah,
because rewriting is a different skill set. Rewriting is where you want to start opening up these deeper channels. If
yeah,
you try to open up the deeper channels in a first draft, you probably are never going to finish it
yeah,
because you will get just stuck, you'll get bogged down. Okay. And again, it's like the dream, you need the story to tell you what it is. and
yeah,
and a big part of getting to the thematic core of a story is forming a relationship with it, not analyzing it. Is again, it's not a patient. You don't psychoanalyze a story. You form a relationship with it so you can speak to it.
yeah,
You can really engage and see what the imagery is trying deeply to communicate. And I feel like this is such a big piece that is missing in so many of the contemporary tales that we're telling right now.
yeah,
um, I've been trying to watch as many of the movies that are out right now that are getting nominated and so on, because I'm often asked to speak about it and so on.
yeah,
So the other night, I said to my husband, I said, I said, we haven't seen Sinners yet, and I really need to see it. He said, sure, okay. So we sat down to watch Sinners, and we started watching it. We looked at each other and we said, haven't we seen this? So
yeah,
we're watching it, and I said, maybe we started it and we didn't finish it. Okay. So we're watching it, and I keep seeing in all this imagery that I've seen this. Okay.
yeah,
Now, what was interesting to me is I could remember the imagery because the imagery
yeah,
is brilliant, right? I couldn't remember the story. So as it turned out, I think we had already actually seen it, and it couldn't have been that long ago. It
That's
was probably
funny.
only a month or two ago that we saw it, right?
Yeah.
And so, so again, there is a lot of very, very powerful stuff in Sinners, but the story itself
It
kind of
wasn't
gets
memorable enough that you,
well, it kind of gets left behind. And one of the things with Aristotle is that he talks about the development of plot and the development of character. And one other area of his 5 or 6 points is the word spectacle. Okay,
yeah,
that it needs elements, visual elements that pull you in.
that
And I
served the
feel
story.
like
Yeah.
this is what so many of our contemporary storytellers are doing right now. They're developing a plot. Okay, so it's something that is action oriented that we
Yeah.
can track and move forward, developing interesting characters, and they are focusing on scene development so that their their magnificent artistic brain is working overtime with developing spectacular scenes, but there's no sense of the whole story.
Well, isn't this what we
And
talked about with F1?
yes, yes.
You're on the edge of your seat. I mean, I saw it in the movie theater, but then when you leave, you go, "What did I just watch?"
Mhm.
You know?
What meaning did it,
Yeah,
how do I connect my own humanity to that? Now, in fairness, most moviegoers don't walk out of the theater saying that.
yeah,
But, here again, it's a privilege to be able to communicate a story on this worldwide stage.
yeah,
And um, if I look at creativity as having three distinct stages. That this first stage is and only can be intuitive. And the third stage is that we're expressing it something into the world. The middle stage is where it needs process. It needs to move from sort of the unconscious intuitive level to actually have something that it wants to become. All right.
yeah,
And we're so many storytellers today aren't well trained in how to do the processing stage.
right.
So it's like, welcome to my unconscious content.
Yeah, yeah,
And it becomes then self-indulgent as
yeah.
opposed to saying, I am you and you are me.
Well, so I want to let me move on to this. So the third pillar that we talked about was that reversals elevate the stakes.
Mm-hmm.
How would now, from your perspective, how do you see how Aristotle did it, and then how do you add to it?
Well, yeah, it sounds perfectly reasonable. Of course, if you aren't continually elevating the stakes, then the movie's basically, or the story is basically over, and let's call it a
Yeah, it's
night.
just sitting there. Yeah,
Okay, so you introduce a conflict, and for me, you introduce levels of conflict. That there's external, internal, and relationship conflict that need an introduction. But if there's a staticness to them, in other words, if there's no urgency behind it, if there isn't something that this will only get worse if it
yeah,
doesn't get resolved, then really there's not a lot of story to tell here, right?
yeah,
Okay, so let's just take it as a given that that element of reversal or intensifying and everything is essential to storytelling. I go back to the concept of, yeah, okay, but where does it come from?
yeah,
All right. Do we just keep throwing in more car chases, more fight scenes, more, um, breakup scenes or whatever? Or are we actually building something that
yeah,
is calling us to move to the next level and the next level? So I remember when Avatar came out, and I was so impressed with how a story that is normally told at this a very simplistic level of those bad guys and these good guys and so on and so forth. And what was what was so profound about the first film
yeah,
is that you saw a character who only was there because he couldn't do anymore what he used to be able to do, which was go out and to fight endless wars. Okay,
Yeah.
he was a warrior, and there was nothing else to him. So if he could just get his legs back, he'd be fine. And over the course of the story, you begin to really see him not just shift in a mindless way, but that everything that was happening to him was causing him to see the world in a different way and to find that his calling, he was so much more than he ever thought he was, you know?
So do the reversals then, are they external and they affect the person internally, and then internally the person changes?
Well, it can actually, that door can swing both ways. Okay.
Because I always
So,
think of Michael Corleone, that he, all these external things that were happening were impacting him internally, and then he had to change internally to deal with all the external conflict.
well, and in our real lives, that's primarily how
How we do? Yeah,
it happens. Although, also in our internal lives, it could be, let's say a person is severely depressed and can't move or can't
yeah,
can't take action. That so it's the inability to act that forces action. Normally it's
uh,
it's reversed. Something happens and we have to react to it. So
yeah,
like I said, this again, we're talking about creativity here, so we can't put a rule on this that locks an artist or a writer into something.
yeah.
What this is has to be expansive, but what we can say is cause and effect. Okay,
Okay, yeah,
out there and in there, something is corresponding. When you start to see a story this way, the scenes, no scene ever be devoid of internal development.
yeah,
Even if, for example, it's a story of a guy, who's goes out and saves the world or whatever. He's
yeah,
let's say a story of a cop who's a big tough guy who is used to fighting big battles. Okay, and it takes a while to build the whole inner sense of the story. Okay,
right.
but from the moment you meet him, we should begin to feel his inner story, whether we're conscious of it or not. Okay. What
Yeah,
does his apartment look like? Is it devoid of family photos or anything that shows he's connected to anyone? Or is it kind of a dump? Is it
yeah,
pristine? I mean, every single thing we see is giving us internal information. And
yeah,
so, one of the things I talk about in the course is that when we're building plot, we need clarity. We need great, big, bold brushstrokes so we can follow the plot. But when
yeah,
you're developing the character and the inner sense of the story, to me, it has more to do with brushstrokes.
right.
That it's the refinement of the sort of the 360-degree view of the character and the world that they're in, because every single image carries so much information of story and it should never be neglected.
Well, and this, I think this sort of goes into the fourth point that I had, and I had to write this down because I wanted to make sure that I put it properly, which is recognition deepens the meaning. And what I wrote down was Aristotle, that the moment the character discovers the truth of, it's the moment that the character discovers the truth about the world. And what I got from how you approach it is the moment the character discovers the truth about themselves, that's really a reckoning.
Well, it's a reckoning, and it's also it's to me it's a threshold. Okay,
Okay.
so I place that moment. I refer to it as a moment of enlightenment, and it
Yeah.
tends to happen around the midpoint of the story, where the story has been in resistance to resolving the conflict, and something happens at the midpoint that shifts. And in terms of external story, they get a big clue. They realize they're in love. Something happens there that shifts us towards resolution. Now we still have a half a story to tell, but something
Yeah.
shifts us. And again, in real life, if you are looking at the arc of transformational change, it doesn't it can happen suddenly, but there's a whole lot that builds up to that sudden moment of enlightenment, and you never see the world the same again. So let's use the example of sobriety. Okay,
Yeah.
that anyone who has gotten sober has a moment where they say, I'm an alcoholic, or I'm an addict. There is that moment where clarity strikes. Now, clarity and enlightenment are not transformation. Okay, that
Right.
in our real lives, that's a threshold. We need to reach that moment before we can move in to the next phase, which is to grow into that enlightenment, to grow into who we are. And so the arc of transformation moves us toward transform, the symbolically towards transformation, which what we see in the second half of a story is that um, transformation's not a gift. Enlightenment can
Yeah.
be a gift. Transformation's not. It's something that we have to work toward and hold. As a value we're moving toward. We can fail, but we can stand up again. But that becomes the overarching goal. So that gives you a lot of guidance of something that needs to happen in the second turning point that will challenge the enlightenment, will challenge, are you really willing to go and stand up for yourself or fight for what's
Yeah.
right and that kind of thing.
I think sobriety is an interesting one then, because I think if you've got somebody fighting with their sobriety in a movie,
Mm-hmm.
is there a difference in the moment that the person knows that the world sees them as an alcoholic until the time that they realize they're an alcoholic? And is that the difference, or is that the transformation? I'm just trying to figure out what would be the biggest impact in a story on somebody fighting for their sobriety as to how the world sees them and how they see themselves.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm so redundant, but again, this is the biggest point. We
Yeah.
have to examine our own lives to see that truth. Okay,
Yeah.
that if you were writing a story about someone who was getting to sobriety, if they got to sobriety, in the first scene, well, that's not true. I think you could put it in the first scene, but
Yeah.
we'd be missing a lot of what it took to get to the idea that this isn't working for me and I want a
Yeah.
different life. And then the story becomes, are you willing to fight for that new life? Okay? Because that's why I separate the idea of enlightenment from transformation. That
Yeah.
whatever, all of us, listen, this doesn't, no one is left behind in this kind and these kind of experiences in life. People stay in bad marriages much longer than they need to, or abusive
Yeah.
situations, or they're stuck in jobs and work and have committed a life to something that isn't bringing them joy and pleasure, or is inauthentic. Excuse me. And these are things that take time to realize that something here needs to shift. Um, you briefly mentioned back a little bit ago the concept that I use, which I call the fatal flaw of character.
Yeah.
My definition of the fatal flaw is that it is a survival system that has outlived its usefulness.
Okay.
And as opposed to something like Aristotle's tragic flaw, which is based on the idea that you've just made a lot of mistakes, you made
Yeah.
bad judgment. If we look at our own lives, it's a lot of our mistakes or bad judgment that have brought us to points of transformation. And so, in many ways, they are our gift as opposed to looking at life as something that should be idealized. If you were a good person, you should have done everything right. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is humanity. Okay. This is where a story can reach a level where your inner world, your spark, your soul is speaking to my soul. All right, because
Yeah.
it's not about perfection. It's about growth. It's about growing into our authentic selves. And most of us can look at our own lives and say, I had to take a lot of detours before I found my way here, but I wouldn't give up any of them because
Yeah.
they actually took me where I needed to go. And you find that you hear repeatedly with people that you think are very wise, centered, good centered people.
Yeah.
Everybody has hurt. Everybody has felt shame. These are things that are part of the human condition. And to discount them as simply having done something wrong
Yeah.
is now it could have a decision that landed you in a bad place. Okay, so I'm not saying that, but and anyway, I think that's really important in terms of understanding how to design character, because the idea of a fatal flaw is saying we don't put judgment on that. Okay, the
Yeah.
person isn't bad or wrong. Every life has reached a level of capacity. That's why you don't want a 25-year-old acting like an 11-year-old. Okay,
Yeah.
that there's hopefully something that is growing in them, that where they're taking on the responsibility for their actions and so on and so forth. And that removes judgment. And then
Well,
we can deal more honestly with our characters.
and pardon me if this is a dumb question. Do you want the audience to sort of have some foresight that a transformation is going to take place, or is it more effective if they're not in on the transformation as it happens?
Well, that's actually not a dumb question at all. It's a very profound question because if we look at transformational growth in reality in our own lives, when when challenging things happen to us, okay, no matter what they are,
Yeah.
there's only two ultimate outcomes that this challenge will either make us or break us. Okay,
Yeah.
as I said, every life suffers. Everybody goes through pain and heartbreak and all that's part of the human
Yeah.
condition. So the arc of transformation says, can you grow through it? And you and I and everybody we know plenty of people who, got buried under it. They died long before anyone threw dirt on their grave. That they gave
Yeah.
up and just enabled themselves to just sort of self-destruct. So, in terms of the question you asked, is there a signal to the audience? And yes, there is a signal. Okay, and it's not a signal like, oh, you're giving away the story.
Yeah.
The signal is that this is going, I refer to this as heroic and tragic. So again, I get out of the Greek mode on this
Yeah.
because in the Greek mode, all drama is tragedy.
Yeah.
And I don't see it that way. That the heroic challenge in life is to constantly grow into our authentic selves. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's facing a whole lot of challenges in life. And we need a signal that something heroic could potentially come out of this. And also that you get a signal at some point that there is tragedy afoot, that the character for me, again, the definition of tragedy for me is a character who can't grow through it. Okay,
Yeah.
that will destroy its host. All right, so it's not something you necessarily see in the first act, but oftentimes right around the midpoint, when you have that moment of enlightenment, you get a strong signal that the character can see their way into the new life. Are they moving toward it? Or
So
are
is this
they or are they denying it? And
is this sort
then
of the I'm sorry, is this sort of the pillar that he talks about, that cathartic conflict creates catharsis? Is that sort of the same thing? Or?
yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, okay.
Okay.
That in catharsis, you want to be able to feel something by the end of the story. That
Yeah.
now. again, the issue I take around the Greeks is like catharsis, like, oh, I'm glad that was over.
Right.
you know, I think I'm oversimplifying. But I think the real catharsis is that you can see yourself in the story.
Yeah.
So I have not had a problem with alcoholism in my life, but I can
Yeah.
feel in the story of an alcoholic the how important it is for as we reach a climax and what we're willing to stand for in this world and who we want to become. That relates to me regardless of what the story is about. And to me, that is the basis of all human story.
Yeah.
Are we willing to fight for life or not? To be or not to be. Okay.
Yeah.
That right there is the whole story. And that's why you don't have to be the same age, the same gender, having the same life experience, the same nationality as that are the components of the story.
Yeah.
You are the story is always about you to me. As
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you always want to have something that even if you're not an alcoholic or you're not a drug addict, there's something about that character that you can identify with, that you can sort of feel their struggle.
That's right. And as I said, if nothing else, you feel that they were willing to fight for it. You
Yeah.
know, I remember when the film, this is a very old film at this point, but when the film with Gene Hackman called Hoosiers came out,
Yeah, yeah.
a friend took me to the movie theater to see it. I go, oh, you sports film. Oh, it's all about basketball. Well, by the end of the story, basketball was my life. I was
Yeah.
like, and again, I'm not a white middle-aged male, and not a sports athlete or whatever,
Yeah.
but it was in the fight for it that I
Yeah.
could totally identify with what how the story got to me. And it was interesting because it was recently on TV and I caught it. I was doing something and I happened to maybe I was flipping the channels and I happened to see it and I watched it, and that old story, okay, because it's a classic now. I think it's many
Yeah.
many decades old. I couldn't take my eyes off of it, you know, and it's because the content had value, and it's something that we just need. We need constant reminders because we go through our daily lives so caught up in the minutia of this problem and that problem and solving and time and did I do enough, and then suddenly something recenters you and says, let's remember what we're fighting for here.
But isn't it amazing in TV and movies that how you can identify with the best characters and the worst characters? You can identify with Walter White, who really does
Yes,
despicable things. He kills people. You
yes,
can you can you can identify with the characters from Succession that are these greedy monsters.
that's
But
right.
then you have Ted Lasso, who just seems like the center of good. You go, oh, I don't know, what is it about great writing that allows us to identify with so many different characters? It's almost like we've got multiple personalities that these characters appeal to.
Well, that you're actually again dipping into archetypal territory here because the it is true exactly what you just said, that one of the things that storytelling does is it removes us from our mundane reality and puts
Yeah,
us in many many different situations that activate the different parts of us. My husband and I have been recently rewatching Peaky Blinders, which I just think is absolutely brilliant. And it's fun to really stream it from beginning to end. Because
yeah,
if you thought it was brilliant to start with, it gets more, and this, we did the same with Breaking Bad. It gets more brilliant when you
yeah,
see it as a whole. Now, this is a story about gangsters who do horrible,
yeah,
horrible things. And yet, there is a part of us that I don't want to say is gangster, but is the ability to stand up against the bad things, just to
yeah,
stand up against oppression and someone who would harm us or whatever. And, so often when we have a bad experience with someone that's so unfair, there's part of us is, I wish I had a gangster to go out and
Yeah.
take care of that. So the gangster lives in us. The gangster is an
Yeah.
archetype. The gangster is a part of us. This is why The Sopranos, you could stay attached to that
Yeah.
character. It doesn't mean you want to know him or have dinner with him,
Yeah.
you know, but it means that he represents a part of us. And this is something that is obviously a much the deeper end of learning a lot of depth about storytelling. But it's important when you create a character to have a sense of what value,
Value. Absolutely.
even the bad guy,
Yeah.
what value is the bad guy carrying even in opposition? Okay.
Yeah. But this is why I'm going to go full circle here that, I think Aristotle sort of taught us how stories worked, but I think what you do is so brilliant is you teach us why the characters and the stories matter and what people can take away from them.
Yeah, and thank you. And what was important to me, because this is how I learn. Okay, everything I teach has to do with how I learn things.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the fundamentals of the whole course is to show you how to sort of give you guidance on how to
Yeah.
get there. Because it's one thing to say, oh, I want to go deeper, or I want the character to be more meaningful, or I want to do this or that. If you don't have a technique for getting there,
Yeah.
you're there's going to be no capacity. You can put it at the top of your wish list, but if you don't have any technique to get there, you're very stuck in what you've always done, as opposed to opening up a whole new area. And to me, that's the value of technique. Our creativity is limitless. Okay,
Yeah.
our creativity is something that we have in abundance, but creativity alone is not enough. If we don't have a process, a technique to take our creative ideas and manifest them, then they're nothing more than a good idea. They're
Yeah.
not becoming what they want to become. So
Well, and it's so funny because something you said at the roundtable we did, and I now bring this up to everybody I talk to because I thought it was such a great point, which is, you can work on a single script and you can help make that one script better, but unless you're making the writer better, it doesn't matter. You got to make
yes,
the writer better, and I
yes,
just think that that's such, and I think that's the value of this video that you put together, this video presentation, this workshop is so amazing because it's something, like I said, people can keep going back to over and over, and it's laid out so cleanly and so beautifully and so methodically that, and nobody's done it. I mean, that's, I've said this before, it shocks me that nobody else has done it, but I don't think anybody can do it like you did it either.
no, thank you, thank you. Well, you can see this is the passion of my life.
Yeah.
you know, everybody has a filter through which they see the world. My filter is story. I mean, I just like, even just watching the news at night. Um, you engage it on two different levels: what is
Yeah.
happening and your reaction to what's happening, and at the same time it opens up for me into, there's a bigger story here that's
Yeah.
being told. Let's look and see if we can see that story. But thank you for mentioning that, because in all my work as a consultant over the years, that has been my goal, to not just help make a better script, but to make a better writer.
Yeah.
Because weaknesses in a script or a manuscript of any kind will point to weaknesses in a writer's technique. And that has to be strengthened. So I don't just give notes and say, oh, I like this part, I didn't like that part. That's kind of useless, even if I'm
Yeah.
right. Okay, that's kind of useless. But if there is something going on where I'm saying that, I'm not feeling a strong enough emotional attachment to the character, well, how do you get to that emotional attachment? If I'm
Yeah.
not working with the writer at that level, then they'll take my note and go home and keep doing what they've always been doing, because nothing has really shifted other than a commentary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the best way for people to reach you? I know the website is goinsidestory.com. Actually, you can purchase the course
Yes.
there.
Yes.
Now, can people get a discount on this course?
Well, Yes,
Oh,
and especially if they watch your podcast.
yeah.
I for you, I
Yeah.
would like to offer any of your viewers a 50% discount if they use
Wow.
the code, Pulse 50.
Pulse
Okay.
50. I'll put that
Pulse
up on the
50.
screen really big.
We could put that up on the site for you. But yeah, just use the discount code Pulse 50, and I would be delighted to offer that to anyone who is interested in our course. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. And that's a great discount because when you look at what live courses go for now, the fact that you can watch this anytime, anywhere, as many times as you want, I mean, that becomes invaluable then.
Right. Well, that's the idea. You own it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, that's the great thing about deep training is that you're going to catch something the first time through, but then you're going to go back and say, I'm really still stuck on this idea of theme. Let me go back
Yeah.
and rework that again, and it's yours. You can watch it, and again, it's got a whole workshop component to it. So it's not just me teaching. You can go back and work through. We have. A part of the offer is that there's a downloadable workbook that comes with it,
Ah, okay.
but uh, you can also get a free hard copy that I will send you,
Yeah.
so you can keep it as kind of a journal
Yeah.
of tracking your story.
Well, Dara Marks, I love you to death. You're amazing. Always love talking to you. We always get so many people always comment whenever whether you did the round table or you on the podcast previously, people love hearing what you have to say. So once again,
Oh,
thank
well,
you so
thank
much
you. And
again.
and you are quite wonderful. You use some of the most stimulating questions. I got to, make sure I'm operating on all cylinders when we're chatting. Thank
Oh,
you.
thanks. Thanks. All right. Well, for the Pulsive Story, I'm Dara Christopher. This has been Dara Marks, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Bye bye. Thanks.